All right, folks, we are back to talk about Sun Tzu and sales. We're going to talk about the moral law today. Now, you might notice I have sunglasses on, doing that to save you if we had an eye procedure and just, keeping your world safe, So the moral law in sales, when things are tough, that's what really separates you in sales is how do you handle it when things are tough. And there's kind of two stages of toughness. There's the first hint. That's when, maybe things have gone well for a while and you have a down month. Then you have it when it's harder than that. Maybe it's an economy like this one and you're starting to really struggle. And that can happen for a few reasons. A couple of the most common are your product is not that good, and so you're not positioned well in the marketplace. The other one I think is far more common, and that is that you weren't really following all the procedures that you could have been. And for that reason, you were selling, but you were just selling because it was a target-rich environment, military people would call it, meaning that you had lots and lots of opportunity with willing buyers. And so pretty much anybody's going to sell in that environment. So then when things get tough, now you have fewer buyers. Now you fall back on your actual skill. And when your skill is not there, then you're going to suffer. So what does the moral law have to do with this? So again, Sun Tzu for sales, the moral law is what we're talking about today. Remember, there are 5 parts. The moral law, heaven, earth, both of those deal with things outside your control. What's basically happening to you, what you have to work with on the outside. Then you have the commander, which is the salesperson in this case. Then you have method and strategy. So today we're talking about the first one, the moral law. And the moral law has to do, in Sun Tzu's context, he's talking about war, he's talking about statecraft. And so the moral law has to do with how committed the populace is to the sovereign. So in our case, you might say, how committed is the populace, everybody in the country, generally speaking, towards a war? You can go back and look at the Iraq War, and you can look at where we were at the beginning and where we were towards the end. By the end, most people had turned against it and said it was a bad idea. At the beginning, lots of people said it was a good idea. I'm not here to argue either side. The point is not what an action is right or wrong. It's rather defining what the moral law is, and that it is the kind of taking the temperature of the people in a nation and their attitude towards the action that the state is taking. So when you back this into a sales context, it comes down to how committed the sales force is to the direction the company is taking. And so that will be product, it'll be service after the sale, it'll be how they treat you with your commissions. I'm on different forums. The sales forums on Reddit are really great sometimes. And one of the things that happens in there a lot of times is they'll come in and cut commissions. Because it's easy to do. You see all that money going on. It's like, hey, what if we paid them a little less? We would make more money. That happens sometimes. Well, obviously that's going to affect morale. That's going to affect the moral law. That's going to affect how your sales force is. And when you're in there, how you and your brothers and sisters on the sales force are dealing with the different things that come up. Now, I was going to say this is where you have to get honest with yourself, but really, if you're not being honest with yourself on a regular basis and you're not in an accountability relationship with some people that are better than you, and they're not asking you honest questions, then you're not really doing all that you can to get better. So you got to be honest with yourself and just start counting, like, how many times a day do you sit around and complain that things aren't going well? Everything's not the way you want it. They're not doing the things that you want them to do. They're doing things to slow you down or stop you. Somebody outside of you is doing things that you can't control that are impacting your ability to sell. How much of your day is spent in that kind of conversation? And really, that's where you start. Kind of on a deeper level, how committed are you to the direction that your sales leadership is taking? Here's the truth. In most cases, you are not going to replace them. So to fight against what they're doing, you're only hurting yourself. You're slowing yourself down. You're going to get less help. You're going to be less successful in that organization. You really have to commit yourself to what they're doing, because they are only going to change when they see that it doesn't work. If they are truly following something that's faulty, if they're in a faulty direction or faulty execution, they have to see that, and they're only going to see that when people follow it and don't succeed. Now, where you are in your career is going to dictate how you behave with this. But what it really comes down to is, how do you behave with what you can't control? If you sit around and allow what you can't control to control what you can, you are going to guarantee that you lose. That doesn't affect anybody else but you. You are going to lose by concentrating on what you can't control. Because I'll say it again in a different way, that comes in and begins to control what you can control. Let's do a little hypothetical here, a short case study. So let's say that stock price went down 20 points this week, and it's affected, or the Dow Jones went down 20 points this week, and it's affected your ideal customer profile. That customer set is now less likely to buy. That's just a truth of the market sometimes. So let's say that's true. Now, how do you handle it? If you sit around and grouse about that, or every time you get a no, you attribute it to that aspect of the market outside of your control, that would fall under something like heaven and earth. If you allow that to control your behavior, that then takes your mind, which you use to choose the good things that you can control, where you can get better, where you can make more calls and send more emails. It controls that and causes it. Now, that is no longer an asset for you, because it's being poisoned by what you're allowing from outside. Now, there's an ego side of this I'm going to talk about real quick before we wrap this video up. But the ego part of you will try to defend yourself to keep you from being at fault. To say, hey, this isn't my fault. I couldn't do anything about it. That's another part of this that will stop you from being successful. You have to set your ego aside. Pretend that you're coaching someone else in your position. That makes it a lot easier. What does that person need to do to be successful? How should that person handle the bad news of today? What's the best and most productive use of that person's time in light of these other things happening? How are you going to coach that person to make better use of their time and be focused on what matters and what will make them a more successful salesperson? Okay, so we've looked at the moral law. How committed are you to the company's direction? What we're really talking about now is that deeper section I talked about, where how committed are you to your fundamentals? Because you have to understand what your fundamentals are that cause you to be successful. And when you allow something from the outside that you can't control to come in and control how you execute on your fundamentals, this is again where you're going to lose. You're the person that's going to lose. It doesn't affect anybody else. So we've looked at the moral law today, how committed the sales force is to the direction that the organization is taking, but also how committed the sales force is to their fundamentals. And then we've applied that to you in your career and how you're approaching your professionalism and how you allow things to control in your mind. Are you going to allow things you can't control to come in and control the fundamentals that you can control and cause you to be less successful? So, hope this helps. Next time we're going to get into heaven and earth. And then after that, we'll talk about the commander and then methods and strategies. Have a great day. Happy selling.